experienced the 2018 eruption, but I've had a long background in geophysics and graduated with only a BS, but have maintained a lifelong interest in geophysics ever since. And a few years ago, probably 2019, Sarah asked me if I might look into what I can find out about the 2018 eruption. And I agreed, and it's been an amazing trip for me ever since. I've learned so much, both about geology and about the 2018 eruption specifically. And Sarah mentioned the seismic evidence that's there. PGV has strictly and sternly rejected any attempts to have seismic monitoring on their plan. And that is because all around the world, geothermal plants are associated with seismicity every single time. And particularly in the 2018 eruption, there were some very amazing things that occurred. This graph shows, basically it's very detailed. It shows the entire 2018 fissure line. These are in heavy white. Oh, these are in heavy white, I'm sorry. It also shows 1955 fissures, and some of the other fissures in blue here that were in I believe from the 1840 eruption. Anyway, the whole area is riddled with fissures. They all move north and south, and northeast, southwest. There's a distinct pattern. And directly beneath the plant, during the 2018 eruption, beginning on the evening of May 8th, I'll give you a little background on that. The eruption began on May 3rd. It was preceded by the collapse of the Pu'u'o'o caldera floor, where there had been a lava lake up until April 30th. Well, on the afternoon of April 30th, that lava lake disappeared. A couple of hours later, earthquakes began pretty close to Pu'u'o'o, and they proceeded to move directly along the rift line, so that in 36 hours, they had reached this white line here. It's not so obvious because this is afterwards, but in that initial surge of the eruption, there were earthquakes along a line from here to here, and then back this way, there were also earthquakes. But beyond, in that initial surge, beyond this line, there was no earthquakes. Then suddenly, and then after the initial rush cross, that was over by May 3rd. On May 3rd, the eruption began. And that's what usually happens when there's an eruption. The earthquakes are responding to pressure. Once that pressure is released by the eruption, the earthquakes stop. And that's a very common pattern, you could almost say universally. Well, these earthquakes, you can see here, began very abruptly, and so there were hundreds of them up until May 3rd, and then they tailed off to maybe there was 20 earthquakes a day on May 9th. But on May 9th, suddenly there were hundreds. This is a very small area. Here you can see kind of Leilani. Here you can see, getting out towards the Capel crater and Fissure 17. Well, anyway, this is a tiny area with hundreds, and they were not the small earthquakes. When Sarah was talking about those hundreds of earthquakes, they were micro earthquakes. These were not micro earthquakes. Some of these were quite large, up to magnitude 3, hundreds of them directly beneath the plant. What a coincidence. PGB didn't have anything to do with that eruption. That's the official story that you will hear again and again and again. This is conclusive evidence. There were hundreds of them within a period of 9 days in a very small area directly beneath the plant. How could that have happened? There was a good explanation for the earthquakes that proceeded across from Kukuo'o to the Lower East Strip Zone. There were hundreds of them just proceeding methodically. The lava started erupting, the earthquakes dropped off. That's exactly the pattern that you would expect. But there was no explanation for that cluster of earthquakes. And it was the largest cluster of earthquakes outside of Holly Mountain, where the crater collapse was happening. It was the largest cluster of earthquakes during the entire eruption, with no natural cause. But as time has gone on, information has come out. And it turns out that Governor Ige, he was here in Pahoa, it was in, I believe it would have been on May 7th. There was a big community meeting because people are freaked out, I mean, people are having to evacuate, and homes are getting buried by lava. The air is, everyone's going around wearing a mask. It was a pretty terrifying time. People are freaked out. The governor comes for a public meeting, and people are getting up, and the main thing they were upset about was the pentane. At the plant, PGB always has 60,000 gallons of pentane, which is very explosive. Basically, kind of like gasoline, just another hydrocarbon. They had 60,000 gallons stored there. And at the meeting, Mike Calaghini gets up and he's like, oh, don't worry, we have a plan. We'll have 10,000 gallons of that pentane gone by the weekend. And this was on a Monday, so he's talking, in 5 days, they're going to have 10,000 gallons gone. Well, people weren't too thrilled about that. That doesn't seem like much of a response. And the other thing that people were worried about, well, what happens if the lava actually overruns the plant? People here have experienced blowouts. It sounds like a 747 engine coming out of the ground. So they were freaked out about that too. But no real alternatives were proposed there. Well, 2 days goes by. Governor Ige tours the area, gets a good idea what's going on, heads back to Honolulu. Well, on the morning of May 9th, Fissure 15 opened up right here. And that is, I don't know if you can see very well, but this is the PGB plant area outlined about here. So Fissure 15 broke out. This is like 300 yards from PGB's wells. He was freaked out about that on that so he called an afternoon press conference on May 9th and threatened PGB that he was going to take over the plant unless they showed him they were serious about the eruption. Well, that very night, all 60,000 gallons of pentane were gone. That very night. They suddenly took it seriously. What also happened that very night was this massive cluster of earthquakes. No explanation except that PGB wanted to save their wells. They didn't want to lose their precious wells and have to re-drill them, because if they had done the sensible thing, they would have pumped cement down those wells. As soon as that lava got near, they should have pumped cement down their wells. That would have sealed them up. there would be no possible danger. But because that would have cost them some money to re-drill those wells, they decided, oh, we'll pump water down there instead. So they pumped millions of gallons of water. This is at the same time that lava is erupting 300 yards away. Anyone who studies geology knows that there's a certain kind of eruption that happens, and that's called phreatomagmatic. And that means that water is involved. If water encounters magma, there will be an explosion. You can be positive of that. And that's what happened directly beneath the plant, because they pumped millions of gallons of water into their wells. Water has half of the explosive power TNT. So basically, PGV detonated the equivalent of an atomic bomb beneath their plant. And what the result of that was initially, so like I'm saying, on May 9th, the seismicity had decreased almost nothing. Aside from Fisher's 15, there was no eruption. Over the next couple of days, somehow I hit the clicker. Anyway, all of a sudden we have a massive cluster of earthquakes beneath the plant. We have millions of gallons of water going down there and exploding, and all of a sudden we have this cluster. This is a more detailed look to show you. Here are the wells. PGV pumped water down 4 wells, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that millions of gallons of water were coming down here. Here we have hundreds of earthquakes. And then, after breaking out at Fisher 17, the Fisher line moved methodically up the red zone and continued to do so until it reached Fisher 8 on May 27th. And to me, that should be criminal, because it was because of that Kapoho was ruined, Halanui was ruined, Pohoiki was almost ruined. And it is all directly attributable to this. This shows a graph of, because one of the most important parts of that occurred on May 18th, when there was a massive outbreak of lava, and it was directly next door to the plant. And this article here, which says the damage and repair of Coon Well KS-14, that described that process very graphically. And well pressures skyrocketed up to 2,000 psi, which is easily enough to fracture rock, and broke out for Fisher 22. Anyway, can we go back? Yeah. So we have these massive pressure upbuild, and PGV is freaking out, of course. But did they pump cement down there? No, they did not. Not until May 27th. And so in that meantime, that water was underneath the plant. They kept pumping. They just kept on pumping for over 2 weeks, while lava is breaking out on the very boundary of the plant. Can we take that back a slide, maybe? Yeah. You can see this Fisher line here. The Fisher line was within 10 yards of the plant boundary for a distance of half a mile. This particular shot also also shows, this is fissure 22 here. That's where there was a massive outbreak of lava. There were also outbreaks of fissure 19. You can see that here. There was another one at fissure 13. That, in my belief, is directly caused by the plant injecting water. That caused billions of dollars in property damage. And even more, way more, in terms of the areas that were ruined. So anyway, I'm hoping that that was coherent enough to give you some idea. I have papers written about that, if anyone is interested, with reference to the different scientific articles, because this is all based on their data. I did not, if I was making data up, I would have not have dared to put a cluster like this. You'll never see anything else like that unless you're looking at an atomic explosion. That's how they used to discover atomic test explosions in the early days back in the 1960s. And that's the only time you're going to see a very concentrated cluster like that. So to me, that shows the plant really doesn't care about the welfare of the people around here. The government is there only to please that company, which is a totally foreign-owned entity. Anyway, so I hope that when people talk about how geothermal is safe, it's the most dangerous form of renewable energy possible.